Nothing's really wrong in my life, but I don't see it going anywhere either. I live in Alabama. It's quiet, affordable, it's easy. When I'm not working, I'm sitting right here in this chair and, I'm talking to the same people. I'm doing the same things. I'm going to the same places. And I just feel like my life is getting smaller. It's not falling apart. It's just shrinking. And then I say, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. But then I start to thinking, and, is it really? Is this how it is? Is this how it's going to be for the next 20 years? What's going to change? I don't know. And I know that, this is not the life I want to live. And honestly, I just don't think I can sit in this chair anymore. And, if you're watching this and saying, yeah, that sounds familiar, well, that's why I'm doing this video. Hi, I'm Scott Baker with Live Long and Travel. Thanks for being here. When it was about this time last year, actually, 1st of February, I started thinking about leaving the USA, and at least not for good, at least not then anyway. I was just thinking about maybe where can I go for a month, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, just, mix things up and get out of the chair. And I started looking at Europe, and I've been to Siena, Italy before, loved it. And I thought, well, I could go back there, and then also Valencia, Spain, never been, but always wanted to go. And also thought about the south of France, Avignon, and never been to the south of France, been to Paris several times. And I started looking around Avignon, and I found an apartment that I could rent for $1,000 for the month. I thought, oh my God, this is so affordable. I mean, I can't even go to New York City for 3 days for that amount. And so, the wheels started turning, and I started thinking about it more and more, and suddenly it wasn't a daydream anymore. And not necessarily that it was about France, but I feel like that I had finally found a solution to doing something, to getting out of this chair. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but when something just clicks in your mind, it's like, yeah, that's it. That's what I need to be doing. What surprised me was how real it got really quickly. And what I was thinking was a temporary go here, go there, maybe once or twice a year, 2 or 3 times a year for a month. It felt very doable, right? But then the more I thought about it, it just didn't make sense. That meant that, I was going to be coming back to, the same expenses, the same obligations, sitting in the same chair. And I realized that I was just pausing. And I've been pausing for years, and I just couldn't see it at the time. That's when I started asking a different question, and I asked myself, I was like, where can I live that I'm not just getting by, or that I'm just not going through the motions of daily life? And once I looked at it that way, I realized that these short stays they just don't make sense. And I was looking at something as a temporary fix when actually I'm looking for a permanent solution. Once I stopped calling this temporary, things changed. I live in Alabama, and leaving is interpreted differently here than it may be other places. And I sort of kept it quiet. I told my family, my friends, but I intentionally didn't go on Facebook with it or anything. And here, leaving is interpreted as a referendum on the president and the job that he's doing. And I've gotten the online comments, and I've seen the video comments that people are like, oh, you're running away, or why don't you try to stay and fix it, or good riddance, and I hope they take your Social Security away, and all those things. And I realized that this move is sort of dampened my excitement. It's like while I'm so happy to be moving, I just feel very mindful of how I present it, and it's a shame. I don't want to feel that way, but I do. I've walked away before. I mean, this isn't new for me. I've made big moves and big changes. And back in the 90s, I worked at Universal Studios in Florida in the marketing department. Good job and lots of responsibility, and very enviable position. But I would go to work every day, and I'd just be like gripping the steering wheel, thinking, "Oh my God, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here." And I realized that it was a good job, but just not a good job for me. And I ended up quitting. And I moved to Colorado, to Steamboat Springs, and I skied for a season. And I remember thinking, oh my God, am I crazy? People told me I was, and I thought maybe I am, but it was not easy. You know, it was tough times. But I look back now, and that was one of the most liberating, freeing periods of my life. And I realized that, you know, my life doesn't have to be falling apart for me to make changes. You know, things don't have to be crumbling around me for me to see it and finally do something about it. About 10 years later, I was back in marketing, and you know, I'm good at it. And I do good work, but had a really good job and good pay. And, you know, it looked good on paper, and but I realized I was, you know, again, letting people dictate to me what a good life was. You know, and I was playing by America's measuring stick for success. You know, it was the income, the kind of car I drove, the kind of house, and how big the house was, and all those sorts of things. And I realized that this is not who I am. This is not the life that I want to live. And again, I took a long, hard look at it. And by this time, you know, photography had been consuming more of my life. And I realized that I wanted to make it more than just a hobby. I wanted to make it you know, my occupation. And so I quit. I moved to the Dominican Republic, and I taught myself how to photograph hotels. And yeah, before that, though, I went to a therapist, and we talked about it for a long time. And I wanted to be sure I wasn't crazy. And you know, I realized that I was running away from a life that didn't fit me, but I was also running to a life that I felt was more congruent with the way that I wanted to live. I've been employed as a photographer now for more than a decade. Some years are good. You know, some years are not so good. I mean, it's the ebb and flow of a small business, and you know, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. But you know, I wouldn't change it for the world. 3 years in, though, short story, I had $7.41 to my name. I was living in Miami, and I thought, oh my God, you know, how did I get here? And you know, the thoughts came back. Oh well, I can go back into marketing. You know, I can easily get a job there. I can do that. I've done it for many years, and I entertained that thought, but I played the tape all the way through, and I'm like, no, I know where this leads. I know that this is not what I want to do, and I mentally shut the door on it. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And you know, it was scary, but lo and behold, the next day the phone rang. Not kidding, the next day my phone rang, and it was an assignment. I'd go over to Naples, and I had to borrow money from a buddy of mine to get gas to go over there to do the assignment. And you know, it wasn't about the money. I mean, although the money helped, but you know, gave me confidence, and it gave me the awareness that I stick with my convictions, and everything works out. And you know, here it is, more than a decade, and things have worked out. This is the part that most people our age don't want to talk about, and that's not what it takes to leave, but what's the price I'm paying for staying? And you know, look, I could stay in Alabama, sitting in this chair for the rest of my life, and my life's not falling apart. I'm not failing. I don't crash and burn, but you know, my life's not getting better, and I just feel like it's getting smaller. As the years creep by, there'll just be fewer options. I'll have less energy. I'll be more complacent. I know how this ends, and it ain't pretty. You know, it's not going to be dramatic. It's just going to be a slow, miserable existence until I fade away, and that's why I know I'm leaving. It's about taking care of me. You know, I think I probably have about 20 good years left, and you know, I'm not going to wake up one day and have regrets and wish I had. Here's what actually changes with this permanent move to France is that, you know, I don't live in two places. You know, I don't have two expenses, and I don't have Medicare either. But you know, I know what it's going to cost to live. You know, I know what my monthly expenses are, and I'll know how much money I've got to spend each month. And you know, healthcare won't be a gamble. I know I'm going to get well if I get sick, and I'm not going to sit there and worry about, oh my gosh, can I go to the doctor today? And you know, just thinking about that, it's like that changes the way that I think and the way that I live. I'm not saying France is perfect. It's not. I know there's going to be hard days. I mean, hey, there's hard days everywhere. But you know, this is a long-term decision that I'm happy to make. I'm the one who wakes up in this body every day, and I'm the one that looks in that mirror every morning. And I know I'm responsible for my choices and the outcomes. And look, you know, this isn't new for me. I've made big decisions like this before, and I feel like I'm qualified to do so. I know what it costs to rebuild. Hey, I've started over a few times. You know, look, this isn't a trial run. I only get one go around. You know, I want a life that gives back more than it takes. And I don't know, maybe you've experienced the same thing, or maybe going through the same thing. But I can tell you this: that I'm not going to let the world pass me by. You know, I've got one opportunity, and I'm not going to sit in this chair anymore. Thanks for watching today. I hope you got something out of it, and I know it wasn't one of those logistics or how-tos of moving to France, but this is very important to me, especially at this point in my life, and like I said, hopefully you got something out of it, and hopefully you'll subscribe too, and share it with your friends, and comment, and let me know what your thoughts are and what you're going through, because I want to build a positive and thoughtful community where we can share our experiences and encourage each other along, and help each other, if whether it's moving to a foreign country or whatever, or even just going through retirement or a major life change, that I like to have a safe place that we can talk about that, and we can share our experiences with it. So thanks for watching again. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a good day.